Hello everyone, welcome to today's session on online engagement for offline empowerment. Thank you all for coming. So first off, you've probably heard some of this blurb before, but I'll repeat it again. I'd like to remind you that we want to hear from you during this session. So please do comment or ask questions using the hashtag OECD3 on Twitter or through our interactive tool Wizembly, which we can see from here. To connect, join the OECD hotspot, click connect on your browser, then have a look at the postcards you'll all have found on your seats for further instructions. As you see, we're in Amphitheatre 3, so please connect to app.wizembly.com/OECD3. Key questions will come to us during the session, which we can put out to the panel. All you need to do is use the Wizembly or tweet with the hashtag so that your questions will show up right here on the tablet. And this is your chance to have your voice heard. We'd love to hear from you. You can contribute in many ways, answer questions, comments, like them to show you agree. All of this will help enrich the debate. These will be displayed on the screen as well. And not only will you hear the debate on stage, but see what those around you and online think. So yeah, I repeat, we want to hear from you. So to start off, we have a poll. So if everyone's ready, what we'd first like to ask you, just to kind of take the temperature of the room, is have you heard of Civic Tech before you came into this room today? So yes, no, or I saw something about it on the OECD forum website. So if you could let us know now, we'd really appreciate it. And we'll come back to the results in just a minute after I have introduced our speakers. So really great lineup today. I'm Rebecca, I'm head of research at My Society. I'm just going to be moderating here, so luckily I don't have to answer the hard questions, I just get to ask them. These lucky three here get to answer all the hard questions. So we have Member of Parliament, Ava Kali. We're very, very lucky to have her here with us today. We have Jeff Mulgan, who is Chief Executive of Nesta in the UK. And we have Virgile Deville, who some of you may have just seen in the Civic Tech Hub speaking. He is the co-founder of Open Source Politics. So I think what we will do now, again, we'll just give you slightly more time to get into that poll and let us know what you think. And while we're doing that, I'd maybe like to put the first questions out to our panel, just to kind of get to know everyone. It'd be great if you can give us a few minutes each on who you are and where you see yourself in the civic tech space. So Ava, if we could start with you.
So, first of all, thank you for having me. I think it has been an excellent event here today with excellent speakers. Our panel discusses about how we can online basically approach more citizens and improve their lives offline. First, I would like to present myself in a way that I think would make it more easy to understand why I'm here. So I'm elected at the European Parliament from Greece. My whole campaign was basically on social media. I could say it was like a zero budget campaign. And to be elected, you have to be voted for. This means across the country. This was not easy, but it gave me a platform that I could approach citizens and basically understand how they think and how they feel. I could campaign through social media and get my voice out there without the need of the traditional media, televisions, radios and stuff. What I understand through this campaign is how you can approach citizens, how you can understand and listen to them, and be able to get them engaged and get them excited. Because one of our main problems is that we don't have young voters. Mostly over 60 are the voters that will definitely get up in the day of the elections and go vote for us. And this was not easy if you want to renew politics. So in the Parliament, the European Parliament, I work a lot with new technologies and economics, taxation, banking. Why? Because I'm from Greece, we are in a crisis constantly. So I had to be involved, and they all want a Greek to explain to them what happened, and we are still in trouble. Thank you.
Thank you, Ava, for being so candid. Jeff, come to you next.
Right. Good afternoon. So, in my career, I guess I've been some of the time a sort of activist troublemaker, trying to annoy governments, and sometimes working within governments, trying to find new ways of engaging citizens through things like petition sites and all sorts of other innovations. My day job now at Nesta is involved partly as a funder of all sorts of civic tech projects, sometimes as an investor, sometimes grant funding, but also convening lots of the sort of digital social innovation field around the world and working with cities. And I guess the thing which interests me, which perhaps reflects where I'm coming from, is that civic tech, I think, has sort of three slightly different meanings. There's one meaning which is all the new tools you can use to try and pressure, campaign, to change how governments work, to see if they're being corrupt or they're serving your interests or whatever. There's another set which are really about citizens linking to other citizens just to do things for themselves, maybe with sharing economy platforms of all kinds. And then there's some which are reaching down from parliaments or parties or municipalities to try and engage the public in a more sort of mature, intelligent debate about policy options. And there's often a disconnect between those. And in a way, I guess this is the subject of our session, that often those more established democratic institutions really struggle with how to be open to the new digital voices, how not to be drowned out by the noise, but also how to balance the often very articulate digital to activists and organizers in a context where probably quite a large proportion of their population doesn't know how to use those tools, is still living much more in an analog print radio world. And that's one of the, I think, the dilemmas for holders of power. How do you get the best of these new tools, which are a hugely energizing force for engagement, but not get captured by very unrepresentative groups of metropolitan, 20-something, highly educated people, the 1 or 2% who often are the loudest in digital forums.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm Virgile.
So hello, I'm Virgile Deville. I'm what you could call a technologist. I'm a civic tech entrepreneur, so I try to build digital tools to do what it just explained. So crowdsource the law, make participatory budgeting, crowdsource ideas, and basically take decisions together and try to open government. In that process, I've worked with several projects. One is an NGO that's called Democracy as France, with an open source tool that allows you to take decisions online and debate together. And then I co-founded Open Source Politics, which takes the approach of trying to advise institutions and help them use those technology by installing open source software for participatory budgeting, public debate, and stuff like that. And I'm a big advocate of well, if we are going to take this democratic thing online, we should try to be as exigent as for our physical institutions. So they have to be open, they have to be transparent, they have to be collaborative. So I'm advocating a lot for this whole new kind of tools that are making the democratic process maybe more inclusive, to be open source so they can be used at different scale of government or by the citizens themselves. Everyone can participate in this process of building the digital democracy. So here in Paris, we are with a group of like-minded individuals. We do hackathons that are called Open Democracy Now, and on the different subject of civic tech, being how to use the parliamentary open data to make a voting app with the blockchain. We try to approach all the kind of civic tech that out there in a free and open way, and making events every 3 months or so. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, can we get the results of the poll up? I've got them here, I can just tell you. Okay, so we've got about 52 people, 52% of people, sorry, that vote. Here we go. 52% of you guys have heard about civic tech before coming into this room today, so you're clearly very interested. We love that. 26% haven't heard. Great. We'll make sure we don't go too deep into the really technical stuff so that we don't leave you behind. And the rest of you have seen something about it on the forum website. So great. I mean, I'm a researcher. I want to point out that's only 27 people that have voted there, so it's not the entire room. So just a caveat there. Great. Okay. Thank you very much. So what we'll do, we'll ask some questions here on the panel. As I say, please do send your questions through. We can see them here, so we can put them to the panel that way. We will have a Q&A at the end as well. But it'd be great if we could kick off, actually, just by doing something, asking something quite general, I suppose, in terms of what does it actually take to empower citizens using civic tech, and how can that actually be sustained? Ava, if we can start with you.
Well, I think we're just at the beginning of doing that. So basically, it's a technology that would help, technology helping citizens to engage in politics and decisions. So we're not there yet. We're working the European Parliament on the geo-blocking, the e-commerce report. It will be finished at the end of 2017. This actually means that you will not have the barriers between the member states of the European Union. I'm sorry. This will be the European Union, so whoever is there. So you saw a bit his organization is beyond borders, so he has a different way to approach this. It's a good, you have a good chance. You know, internet has no borders, basically. We try to remove any barriers now. So even if you leave, you can have a different alliance and coalition there. What we're trying to do is to make it easy to access any content, even from a different country. Sometimes you cannot access it. You should have the same offers, which means the same value that you can get it from Italy, you can get it also from Germany, because sometimes they have different they target the markets differently through the sites, which means you buy something that's more expensive. If you book a hotel or a car, now you have the right to choose the lowest offer there, so you cannot be discriminated. This is a first step. Imagine, we still talk about barriers on the internet. Moving from that, I would say this would make it easier for European citizens to feel that they have a big market here and they can actually respond, they can actually work in Europe, they can actually have an e-store and be able to set up their own business in Europe. Some friends told me it's more easy to export in China than in Europe. We have 28 different taxation, legislation systems and mentalities, of course, and languages. So slowly, we try to remove these barriers to make a digital economy happen, to make it more easy. This means, of course, that we have to train citizens, we have to train kids to learn coding, for example, because if you don't have the digital skills, this can very easily have you excluded from this new world. So to move to a civic society through technology means that we have to educate citizens. We don't have so many. We have to have also free Wi-Fi. We have to give them access to internet. We have also another project, is Wi-Fi for Europe. We will have public spots that you can access free Wi-Fi, especially into places that it's not easy, it's not possible. We also try to give a lot of funding for infrastructure, because I remember some friends were telling me we have to stay in London because it's too expensive. If you go outside of London, the speed of the internet is not easy for an entrepreneur to set up his business that's dependent on the internet. So we have to build on these new technologies. And if I may say, what happened in 2008 with the crisis was basically the failure of the system to protect citizens, taxpayers across the world. And I think the response there was new technologies. And that's why I believe we can gain new trust by using civic technology. Open democracy, you say. I don't think people trust the governments more than the internet. I think they trust them less. I think citizens trust less the banks than actually online fintech and even blockchain. So I think there's an opportunity there to use this technology to get citizens actually engaged and make them trust the system again if we embrace it.
Thank you. Lots of interesting themes coming out there. Trust, structural needs. Jeff, what's your take on this?
Well, if you ask the question, what would make a citizen feel powerful and be powerful, and we're not talking about you in this room because you're all powerful by definition, the fact that you're here, but sort of think of your cousins and neighbours. I think there's probably four main things where civic tech can contribute both to the reality of power and the experience of power. So the first is you need information. You need reliable data to make decisions in a democracy. And to that respect, the internet is both a wonderful blessing and a curse, as we've seen in the last year. And I think what a lot of the civic tech activists have been campaigning on is new ways of opening up data about what's happening in the economy or the environment, so sensors of air quality, for example, getting much more detailed analysis of where governments spend your money and making that transparent and visible at every stage. But I think there's a huge amount still to be done to make sure the informational universe is reliable, is accurate, lies are counted, and so on. And that's clearly a great battleground of now. Secondly, as you just heard, you need some skills and you need widespread capabilities to use digital technology. That means kids learning how to code. My organisation has done a lot of this in the UK with clubs, curriculums for schools and so on. So it just becomes part of normal literacy that you understand how digital things work, how to make apps or robots, etc. But I think there's also a side of this for civil society. A week ago I was in Korea. And Seoul and Korea are probably, I think, now at the cutting edge of trying to advance civic tech, both from cities and national government with a new president and civil society, and doing big programs on training on big data so that small NGOs actually understand how to use data to help them do their work. I don't think anywhere in Europe or the other OECD countries is quite doing that to the same extent yet. But without that broad-based capability, the rest means not very much. Then thirdly is the ability to take part in shaping policy and shaping decisions. And there's a whole array of platforms like Democracy OS, Lumio, the dissent tools which we designed with a bunch of partners across Europe, which means that citizens can propose policies, can comment, can improve policy ideas before they're implemented, working often with elected politicians, not as an alternative to them. Some of those are about spending money. So Paris has a big participatory budgeting program. I think it's 100 million euro this year. I think it's 30 million euro for school kids divided by arrondissement. That's a pretty advanced attempt to give citizens both, again, a reality of power and a feeling of power as well on, so fairly large sums of money. And then finally, you need some ways of scrutinizing what is done in your name to find out actually if it is achieving its goals. And that's been another area for the last 10, 15 years of civic tech innovation, scorecards of all kinds to monitor how well policies are working, what they're achieving in terms of school results or healthcare or welfare or unemployment, so that when you hold your politicians to account is on the basis of the facts, not just spin.
Virgile, how do we sustain citizen empowerment? And maybe you could give us a little bit of an idea as well of the kind of technological underpinnings of that, not just the kind of engagement side of things.
Well, actually, I'll go against the foot on that. But I would like to go back to what Jeff said before. There's been a use of civic tech which is outside of public institutions, which has been widely used with online petitions, and open data has been quite fairly spread across the civil society. And from my point of view, and where I've been trying to have an impact, is when the institutions try to use these new tools and actually create a culture of being open, cooperate to create a policy together. What we've been observing is that in the culture, those new tools are very exciting for the citizens and for the institutions because there is a big crisis on trust of the system of politician of democracy, and lots of elected officials and public agents think, oh, there might be a solution. Maybe we can use those tools and be more accountable, or at least think we are more accountable, or maybe just try the process and see what it does. So of course, great tool exists to make participatory budget, to do public debates online and co-creation of legislation. But what I've seen from my experience is that when we set up an online space, as much as great technology we have, and we have great tools now, it's quite cheap and easy to do. Not much people have been participating. In France, we've had great experiences shaping our digital ecosystem law. It was La Loi Le Maire. And we were really happy because we had lots of people participating, but it was 20,000 people at the scale of France on the subject of digital. So we are speaking to the digitally native there, and it's quite a low participation rate, and it's the biggest initiative in France that happened. So my take is more. I'm a technologist. I build software, so I love code and computers. But what I've seen is it's not enough. You've got to build the online space, and I came to that because I feel that there must be a space. I can't bear the fact that institutions don't use these tools to actually, every time they have a decision to make, try to discuss it with the people. So the space has to be there, but it's not enough. You have to rely on all the existing offline spaces to actually co-create and shape policies, and a tremendous amount of work has to be done by the institution to invest in going to speak with the people and trying to be as much as representative. So we've had some interesting experiences with like micro projects in local government and stuff, but still not so much people participating. And one experience I think is fascinating is what big cities are doing in Spain. For example, the city of Madrid, the city of Barcelona, they've changed political leadership, and they come from the citizens movement, and it's inside their DNA to actually try to be inclusive. And when they build a platform for the citizen participation, they try to actually to change that relation of power that we see now in Civic Tech. It's just like consultative. They really try to make it impactful. So, for example, they have this first campaign. It's a crowdsourcing of ideas, and if an idea is supported by more than 40,000 citizens, the city council will put it to a formal vote, and if it's adopted, it will actually do it. So this kind of accountability and proof that the citizen will be implemented is very important. But what I see also is they are able to do all that in Spain and going actually to the people. It's because they have a big ecosystem of civil society that runs up around the idea of, well, I'm in power, I'm participating, and they have also the means of a big city to actually try to be representative and to go out, to go speak to all these different people. And this comes with the political will that it's in their culture, and they're putting the means to do it.
Great, thank you. Really interesting points all. Virgil, you hit on something quite interesting then, which is the kind of difference between this kind of top-down approach that maybe institutions are taking, proactively, very admirably, versus the kind of grassroots, upwards kind of activism that Civic Tech has kind of grown out of over the last sort of 10 years or so. Civic Tech was kind of supposed to be quite a disruptive technology to kind of combat the top-down behaviors of institutions. So how do we kind of marry the two of those together? Because obviously we want, the European institutions, we want the big institutions to be invested in this kind of space, but without losing that kind of grassroots, upwards kind of user focus and interest in kind of disrupting what the institutions maybe want to put out there? How do we kind of marry those two together?
Well, shall I have a go? And I think the Barcelona Madrid examples are really interesting ones. And indeed, they were the two of the pilots for this descent project. In both cases, the technologies were first adopted by mayoral candidates before they were elected as a way of involving many more people in shaping their programs to be mayor, and had a large scale both online and offline engagement in talking about issues on housing and jobs, etc. I think that helped them then win election from slightly outside the system. They've then integrated exactly those tools into the way the municipalities work, Madrid Decide and Barcelona en Comú. So, as you said, it is now possible in the real time for citizens to propose ideas, comment, adapt. But crucially, I think they've kept the lesson. You've got to combine the online and the offline. Indeed, if you're not doing a lot of face-to-face meetings in communities, you get exactly the distortions which you were talking about. And so far, both cities, I think, are managing to maintain pretty high levels of engagement, both online and offline, and are relatively reflecting the class and age mix of their cities, which again is quite unusual for digital democracy projects. And in a way, they're an answer to your question, but they probably prove you can't really program the answer. It has to be slightly organic to come out of what's the healthy tension between grassroots civil society campaigning and then the power of the state, which then tries to make things systematic.
Well, let me try to understand the question. So how we can help this technology to be adopted by citizens? Well, I think citizens, as I said, lack trust. So if there are so many applications, health applications, I'll give you an example. But health application, to actually do what they're supposed to do, to provide, to take data and maybe try to get patterns and identify a disease before it even happens, or help you with improving your medication, it's not going to be useful unless citizens use it. And they just use one out of 100. Why? Because they don't know which one to trust. So what we're trying to do from my field, we try to find ways to authenticate or verify some applications that are actually valid, they have scientists that made them, and people can actually trust them. This is not easy because you have to allow innovation to happen, but at the same time you have to make sure that if something goes wrong, citizens can go back and claim what they lost: data, privacy, money, anything. So one of the main things is to have proper and smart legislation, and it has to be balanced. It has to protect citizens but not disrupt the disruption of innovation. That's what I'm trying to do, and many, I think, politicians that understand the new technologies, there are not so many. I have to tell you, if you ask politicians, do they know how to access social media? Just a few, usually it's their assistants, even the young ones. They come to me for sometimes, and I try to open them accounts on Twitter to follow our discussions. So it's not easy. And sometimes I have events on, as I said, blockchain. I think it's an amazing technology. And I ask how many of you have e-wallets, and they don't. It's like 3 out of, 80, 100. Which is not a lot. This means we have, first of all, to have politicians that understand the technologies, to legislate properly. The good thing is that in the Commission we have DGs that work very fast, and they have this foresight of new technologies, and they give funding to startups and to scale up some companies and to create hubs of innovation. But I think we can do better than that, of course. We have also some pilot projects through our agencies. If you know EIT is an agency on innovation and internet technologies. They do coding lessons for girls for free, so they can actually be taught Python language, and then they can make their own site or blog or application. And this can attract more women in the field, because here you have an excellent gender balance, but that's not the case. Usually It's me, 2, 3 other women, and then 100 men around. And they look at us, you know, in a funny way, like, what are you doing here? Are you part of the discussion or not? So we have to change that. And I do believe that by helping these technologies to flourish, we can also have a generation balance. Because we had a discussion before that young people do not vote. They do not go to vote, even though their future depends sometimes on elections, at the Brexit, for example. The young generation didn't want this exit, but they didn't go to vote. Well, I think we have to improve the voting system. So open democracy could be an example. We have to test it in some maybe cities or some decisions that are not critical to see. Maybe there are flaws there because this is a developing technology. But I think it's going to be more easy for to get young ones to vote through an application, and also the people that live abroad, they don't live in their country. We have a problem there. You have so many citizens that work in different countries and they cannot afford to go back and vote, but they actually want to go back in a couple of years, or they study abroad and they want to have a saying into what is shaping their future. So we have a big field to do things there. But there is funding, there are some pilot projects, we take suggestions, we try to create some hubs where citizens will be able to have access to all our information, because we also try to have platforms like that and discussions in the parliament to teach politicians the new technologies, and then they are able to decide by having all the data, all the scientific data that they need to make the decision.
Really, really interesting points there, and I think the use of information, it can be used for enormous good, can't it? But we've obviously got the issue of the more information you have, possibly the more risk. So, I mean, civic technology is no different from any other technology. Security, personal privacy, you know, these are important issues, but are potential risks. So I wonder if the panel can maybe talk a bit more about what risks are associated with civic technology.
Maybe just one very small point, because we have a general election in my country tomorrow, which I won't predict. But we did a data analysis of the likely winning candidates in the parliament, which will form after the election. And only about 8% of them have any qualification in science, technology, engineering, etc., compared to about 42% of graduates coming out of universities. The same was true in Germany and several other countries we looked at. The European Parliament, interestingly, was the exception, which has, I think, 25% of MEPs have a PhD, an incredibly well-educated institution full of very clever people. But most of our parliaments are full of lawyers, or sort of political, you know, hacks, to be slightly unfair on them. And that does mean that the people making the rules on issues like privacy, data handling, just don't have a grounding which makes it enables them to understand what's going on. And I think there's a huge job in almost every country of educating the decision makers. Yeah. And it's not clear whose job it is to do that at the moment. So I would urge every parliament, and maybe the OECD, to think of what was boot camps to bring the legislators and indeed senior officials as well, just up to speed with the digital realities. You know, how does blockchain work? Stuff like that.
Well, so I hope we don't have many lawyers here today, because I think we do need less lawyers and more engineers, and more informative sessions. And it's not easy to get even the members of the parliament engaged in the new technologies, because they have to make, you know, every day they have to persuade their voters that they work for them, for jobs, for growth, for equality, for human rights. There are so many issues going on, environment. So new technologies usually is left behind to the entrepreneurs. I'm not sure this is a bad thing. At least we should not legislate in the wrong way to disrupt them. But let me just say, OECD had this study that said almost 100 billion euros were hidden costs among the financial services usually. So if politicians would understand that improving through new technologies how things work and reducing bureaucracy or the transaction fees, this would make huge amounts of money for them to spend to actually reduce inequalities among citizens, and that would get them elected. So I think, yeah, what I got from this discussion today is that we have first to engage politicians and then citizens.
On the question how we deal with the problem of information online, I think that when you think about who deals with the information and generate this problem, and how they position themselves towards civic tech, meaning Facebook, Google, Twitter, and so on. It's quite interesting because they've been more and more involved in the field. If you go to TIC, which is an event organized by My Society, Facebook and Google are big partners, and they are becoming more and more interesting in the field. So Google will notify you when you have to register on the voting booth. They will compare. Facebook will compare the programs, and I think it's with civic technology and what the challenge I was trying to explain before is more and more our democracy are happening online. Of course, we will always have physical institution, face-to-face discussion, but more and more is becoming online, and the challenge of this being transparent, open, incorruptible is tremendous. And when you think, well, about all the narrative of, well, nation state, they are not the best level of governance today. We have we've had elections outcome who are not ideal if you are a progressive person, and we have to change the scale, maybe go regional, maybe go more international. What's the right level of governance? And when you think of more international actor that could be post-nation state, you think of Facebook, of Google, and those are actors that live by the saying of "don't be evil," but they are the place that well, digital democracy is happening today. Lots of things online are being shaped by our activity online. I mean, the filter bubbles, the access to information, and the fact that we rely on the fact that they try not to be evil is a big problem. So Civic Tech has a challenge to actually, well, we have to stay open source, and we have to create those digital spaces for access to information, for shaping policies together, and so on. So when you say blockchain is an amazing technology, it's also because of that. We've had, as you said, internet has been really great, really awesome, but it's also a big curse, and lots of the thing people said, yeah, we could do all that, but maybe it could go wrong on this, and this, and this, and almost of it happened. So the real deal now is how to figure how we can leverage an infrastructure of internet for governance that can't be evil. And some blockchain speakers are saying that, how do you create incorruptible, completely transparent, decentralized, distributed ways of, well, accessing the information, taking decisions together? I think it's a huge challenge, and it's coming in the next years, but that's what we need to have in mind, because if you look at the map of the earth and put what web services are being most used today, you have actually the real nation state today. You see Facebook on the west, Yandex on the right. So it's the real challenge for me.
Thank you. So we're clearly invested in civic tech, I think, up here. I suppose one last question I'd like to ask at this point is, does it work? I'm a researcher, you know, I'm the least popular person in my organization because everyone else builds nice shiny stuff, and then I come along and say, oh, does it work? Prove it. Let's do an experiment or something. Let's do some research. So yeah, I mean, we've got this attitude. Civic tech is probably a good thing, maybe. We'd like to see more of it. But yeah, how do we know that it's actually a good thing? How do we know that it's working?
I think that's a really good question, and I think the short answer is we don't quite yet know. And it's worth asking what would working look like? And I think there's several quite different things. There's one version of civic tech which helps democracy make more intelligent decisions, to tap the expertise of thousands of citizens who might have, deep knowledge on the issues being talked about, but maybe a very small percentage of the population. And that's a hopeful trend, but certainly not yet proven. There's another route which claims these tools will make people feel more trust or more legitimation, feel they're genuinely represented. I think we haven't yet got enough mature examples at scale to see if that's really the case. And we have some slightly bad experiences from things like freedom of information laws and other kinds of transparency, which often haven't increased trust. They've even fueled distrust. But I think we're only just beginning to get to the examples which will, in a way, test your question. And I just want to give one of them, which is a live one, which is from Taiwan. I don't think there are any Taiwanese in the room today. But there, and it's a very sort of interesting story. I think 3 years ago, a group of hackers, activists, occupied the parliament over a whole series of policy issues. The leader of that group, post the last presidential election, actually became the Minister of Digital, and through a project called Taiwan has tried to reshape how Parliament makes decisions on some issues using exactly the principles. Up here we would say, I think, are good ones, with an explicit process for, first of all, tapping lots of people's ideas on what the facts are as an issue, then tapping experiences and feelings, then looking at all the different options before moving to a decision-making process by the legislators, and then having a scrutiny process. Now, we need quite a few of those dealing with serious issues and analysed over a period of years before we can really answer the question, did that lead to better quality decisions, and did that lead to a public feeling more confidence and more trust in their system? And there'll be some false starts. But I find it inherently hard to believe that the public of a country like France or Taiwan or wherever else, who in the rest of their lives, if they're consuming music, going on holiday, shopping, doing their finance, automatically use digital more than offline processes. The idea that government and democracy can be completely different and completely offline and retain confidence seems to me pretty implausible. So I'd almost flip the question on its head and ask, can we prove that the offline processes lead to good decisions and trust? Because probably at the moment they don't really.
Well, that's a big issue again. So I would say that yes, it is actually happening, but not as fast as we expect. As I said, we have to teach and educate citizens to use the new technologies to benefit from them. I think first they have to understand why this would change their lives. And if I may say, what actually happens when you use new technologies is you can get things happen faster, more efficient, maybe in a better quality, safer sometimes, and cheaper. This means it would benefit citizens if they would go online into their many transactions and some things that they could do for everyday life. I do believe that, as I said, the e-commerce would help a lot. It's being done 2017, so it's not there yet, but it can help a lot of entrepreneurs and maybe even women that have to stay at home and have to stay with their families. They can work online. They have their own company from home. This would also be an opportunity for them. So, and if you think that you can have municipalities slowly adopting these technologies, you can have safer cities, you can have better administration, less bureaucracy. We already have some examples of, like in Estonia, they have e-voting already, so you can vote online. This has more people to participate, it's more easy. We have already some countries that they do online the land registry. This means you have less paperwork to do and less bureaucracy also there. You can have an online ID. This is something that Europe is working on. The next 2 years, you will be able to have instead of a credit card, an electronic ID, and then you can verify who you are with 2-3 steps of verification. And then it would make it easier to vote and to use all the advantages of civic technology. What I would also like to add, because I think most of what we are interested in is to get cheaper, cheaper services. I would say that fintech has changed our lives a lot. Some SMEs that after the crisis could not have access to financing, they can have access to financing. We just voted the PSD, the second directive on payments, which means we force the banks to share their data anonymously, but if the companies need to get an accreditation for this company that asks for funding, they can get it from the bank, and then they can crowdfund money, and they can give short loans to SMEs that they wouldn't get them from a bank. The open banking is something that just happened now. It was not the case. So we have open science happening also in the European Parliament. So everything that we have, all the studies, all the research, all the scientific data that we have to make decisions, it's out there, it's free to share. We have excellent scientists contributing there. And so I think open governance is the next step. It's we're getting there. It will take some time, but I think we're getting there. But the most important thing is that innovation is unstoppable. And we have to facilitate it, and we have to show to the citizens how they will benefit from that. And as I said, it can change their lives, and they can save a lot of money, they can protect their data, they can get better health, not even insurance, but they can have their doctor at home through online services. But I have also to mention that we have to do it at the same time while we protect citizens, because I go back to health because I think it's really important. There has been a case where a lady was sharing her information on an application about a chronic disease, and the third trusted party that she accepted to take her data was actually her insurance company. So she was excluded from her insurance. We have to make sure that companies cannot do that. When we say anonymously, they have to be anonymous. Whoever misuses data of citizens has to pay a fee that would be unbearable to pay. So we have to do it one step at a time, because at the same time we have to protect citizens from these new technologies.
Virgil, does Civic Tech work?
So I think it's not a yes or no answer, but with Civic Tech, we've definitely seen improvement and ways of opening the government. I'd say that every single bit of data we've opened is already a yes for Civic Tech, and every euro that's been decided by participatory budget is also a win. And I've been working on this project, and there are small wins, but I'm really enthusiastic about them. And then to come back to if it's gonna work or not, I think it's all about the process Jeff described at the beginning: data, education, shaping together. I really like the Loch Ness model of e-democracy. It's a model that's described in the work of the World Bank on how new technology can empower citizens and actually improve the quality of life and even economic reality in developing country. It's a process you in 4 stages where the first one is it's opening data. The second one is for people to being able to participate. The third one is for people to actually to collaborate. It's not just consultative, they have a say in things. And the last one, where maybe Civic Tech will be more effective, is where actually the citizens are in charge, and we rethink representation and the role of public institutions to be actually maybe as a platform to facilitate the process of shaping policy, of taking decisions together. So it depends of what of where you are in the process. I think we are very early, but maybe in the second, third stage at some points. And I'm very enthusiastic, and I think we are on a good path, though.
Great to hear. So I've just been looking at some of the comments and the questions that have come through online, and there are a few that talk about the potential for scale, but also about the potential for these kinds of technologies to actually make a difference in the global south or in developing nations. Is civic tech just for, a bunch of white people in wealthy countries in the north, or can it actually make a difference in developing countries as well?
Well, I think one of the really interesting things about civic tech as a movement is it is an unusually global movement which doesn't really have particular, it's not a sort of north leading and south following. So, I mean, one of the most dynamic areas is East Africa, Nairobi in particular, generating all sorts of civic tech ideas, which then spread all over the world. I mean, the poster child for that would be Ushahidi and disasters, but there's many, many other breakthroughs have come from there. And Africa is advancing digitally at an extraordinary pace. India, as Mr. Guria, I think was said earlier today, with the UID Aadhaar project with now 1.1 billion citizens with a biometric ID, that's a platform which actually will allow, first of all, a lot of financial innovation, but in time, I think lots of different kinds of civic innovation as well. And India, anyway, has been very, very fertile. China, too, I mean, perhaps surprisingly, has a civic tech movement. It's mainly focused on things around the environment, clean air, campaigning, etc., rather than sort of classic democracy. But, again, that is influencing how decisions are made. If anything, I would say the old democracies are more resistant in some respects to civic tech because they've got such sort of fixed, solid structures, parliaments where people walk through doors to vote, usually dominated by pretty old assemblies. Estonia is where it is, partly because they had very young leaders over much of its recent history. And my guess is many of the breakthroughs will come from surprising places. Participatory budgeting, remember, was pioneered mainly in Brazil, and the ideas now being used in Paris or in Portugal, have in part been absorbed from the South. And that's what makes this an exciting field, and where there's a lot of mutual learning. I mean, just to do one plug, if you're interested, about 3 months ago, we at Nesta published a global survey of the state of digital democracy. If you Google Nesta digital democracy, you'll get it. And those examples are really from all over the world. They're all, as I said, not yet quite proven. They're just beginning to get to serious scale, just beginning to be really big issues in parliaments, in parties, in cities. But it's a very, very exciting field.
Let me just add something that I don't think we included in our conversation. So what if tomorrow everybody was engaged and we had an open democracy and everybody could vote online for everything? Well, I think we could have big disasters there, because first you have to inform citizens, you have to educate them. Sometimes the gap between online and offline is huge, and you have to work to build the bridges there. Because you think that if I press a button and I say, yes, I want this thing to change, it's more easy to do it on your phone. But if it takes place, it can change your life. And I don't think everybody can understand that, or can understand that there are consequences for their decisions. So there was a presentation in the parliament. We had an event on distributed ledger technologies and how we could use it for voting. And there was this liquid democracy application that you can vote and you can see online the results, and at the same time you can go back and change your decision if you don't like the result. So, especially not in UK again, you didn't have this chance, but there is a point where you have to stop and make a decision, and this decision has consequences. So you have to understand that online has consequences in your everyday life. So we have to bridge this gap of understanding. And in Switzerland, everybody has a referendum every 6 months, or like even less. But this is not the case in other countries, where they can vote against something, but they don't want actually something that they did not vote for. but they get it. So I think we should educate citizens because it takes time. It takes time for us to adjust. We talk about Internet of Things, and now we talk about Internet of Information. Suddenly we talk about Internet of Value and Internet of Everything. And still some people, half the population, cannot use Internet. So imagine what could happen if we move very fast. It's even too fast for legislation. We've been talking also about artificial intelligence. There are patterns there that are created by your searches. So if you search on Facebook or Google something, it can create a pattern for you, and then it can suggest that you need vacations, or where you should go for vacation, because they understand what you like. And at the same time, they can make you start needing things that you don't need. They can suggest that you should buy something that you didn't need, but when you saw it, you decided you need to buy it. So they can even change your mood through these patterns. Artificial intelligence experiments into changing our mood online through the newsfeed. We have to protect citizens from that. They have to understand when something changes, when the newsfeed changes, that this is not the real world. This doesn't mean that everybody sees the same content. And I think we have to be very careful with this technology also.
Can I just make one brief comment on this very important issue about voting? Because I think for quite a few decades it's been assumed digital democracy just meant lots more voting. There'd be a sort of permanent referendum on everything, like liquid democracy, or like on Facebook, like, not like. And that was the future where, you know, all through the day you might be voting on 101 things. As we've often found with referendums, that's not necessarily the healthiest side of democracy. And in fact, voting is just one part of an ecosystem of debate and deliberation and media and civil society. And I think there's been a big shift in the last 5 or 10 years towards digital democracy innovations, focusing less on voting and much more on all the other bits. How do you get an intelligent process of proposing ideas, scrutinizing them, and actually possibly not very many votes at the end? And it's a complete turnaround, to say, from what the futurologists imagined this was all about 10, 20 or 30 years ago. And to my mind, a world where the whole citizenry were, you know, all of us were voting all the time, is a vision of hell, actually. I mean, really of hell. And all of the good projects now try to, say, enhance intelligence around the voting process through essentially better conversation.
We have also fake news around, and this is something that we have to address without changing freedom of speech. We have to protect completely freedom of speech, but we have to be careful. If something is fake and you have elections and there is something going viral and it changes the result and your future without being correct. So you have to get algorithms that would give you the other options, and you understand that this is not just one point of view. There are other points of view there that could have implications to your life and consequences.
Definitely, and there's been quite a bit at this conference, I think, already about, you know, post-truth and fake news and all of these kinds of things. And quite a lot of the questions that and comments that have been coming up have been around, you know, how can civic tech actually contribute to this? How can civic tech combat things like echo chambers or fake news, or you know, address confirmation biases, for instance? So great to hear that this is on the minds of everyone. We are about 35 minutes. We've got about 25 minutes left, and I think we should probably put out to the floor for some questions. Just before we do that, you know, having had this kind of very interesting discussion talking about the opportunities and risks of civic tech, we'd quite like to do another poll, if that's okay with everyone here. Having heard, you know, from our speakers and from other people at the Civic Tech Hub, if you have done, do you feel that civic tech is good or bad for democracy? So it would be great if you could vote now, as soon as possible. And we might as well throw those results up pretty immediately if we can do. Maybe we should have a different poll. Are you bored of polls?
Or maybe we should have the poll before and after the discussion.
Maybe.
Because I think I would say good, and then after the discussion I would say maybe I don't know. Maybe it takes some time.
50-50. Okay, well maybe we can come back to that. So great. Are there any questions from the floor? Yeah.
Hi, Tim Hughes from Involve. I just wanted to follow up on that previous discussion. So Involve, my organisation, has always advocated for more deliberative forms of engagement, so getting citizens to discuss kind of the trade-offs that need to be made between different policy options. But there's also a school of thought which suggests that actually what you want is very large, diverse groups of citizens to make decisions, not necessarily based on any more information, because larger, more heterogeneous groups of people tend to make much better decisions than smaller, homogenous groups. And as soon as you start getting them to discuss things, then there are all sorts of kind of biases that might enter into the picture. So I want to get your thought on kind of which of those kind of places that I guess the civic tech world has kind of has focused in the past, and where you think there is kind of room for development in the future. Kind of, do we need more discussion within civic tech, or actually do we need those kind of larger scales, kind of voting and yeah, smaller interactions?
Thank you. Virgile, do you want to go first with this?
I think Jeff summed up pretty well the issue. Well, I not necessarily agree on the fact that referendum, because it has turned badly for in some cases lately. I think it's one symptom of we are not having enough participation and capacity to voting. So when I'm saying no to Brexit, when I'm saying no to staying in the European Union, and I'm actually saying much more than that when I vote no. I'm saying that I'm not happy with the political class, with the system, and I think more ways to participate and to vote could actually help having good outcomes with referendum. So I'm actually a big advocate of liquid democracy, and it's a complex subject. It has emerged 10 years ago, and it was firstly implemented by the Pirate Party in Germany, and we've seen all kind of software trying to do it, and nobody's cracked the equation for now. So so liquid democracy is when you can vote directly on an issue, or delegate your vote to someone else, and who can in turn delegate his vote to someone else, and you can build bottom-up representation. It's called liquid because you can actually revoke your delegation at some point if you're unhappy about the decision your representative has been taking. I really like this kind of system because it really reflects how we evolve as a society online. It's a network democracy, and we follow people on Twitter and we like statements. And I'm not saying like tomorrow we will have a liquid democracy for the European Union or anything, but I definitely think there is, even if in 10 years we haven't cracked the equation of liquid democracy and how we can find new ways of representation, of voting, of taking decisions with that way. I'm still working a lot on that thing with Democracy Earth, with the software that's called Sovereign. There is still much to figure out, and we need help. So you guys are welcome. We're on GitHub. But yeah, and I also agree with what Jeff said. What the Taiwanese pioneered as a process to take a decision on a complex matter by giving data, then generating ideas, then see emotions, then gather the people concerned by the decision and stuff. It's very interesting, and it's interesting that they've went off the classic forum of a discussion. I put an argument, you put a counter argument, and it goes like Reddit. They've gone much more farther and much more an immersive way of having conversation and taking decisions. They actually like do 360 videos of the people they've identified online being representative of different opinion, and then you can watch this and watching every single person opinionating on that. And they use a platform that's called Polis that actually enhance conversation by creating real-time opinion group. So by how people agree on an argument or not, you're able to say what is the consensus on what group, what is the dissensus between two groups, and you're actually to be able to construct on the consensus between the two groups and evolve towards a smarter decision. So I totally agree on what Jeff has been saying, but I also think that we mustn't give up on voting and liquid democracy.
Great. Jeff, Ava, do you have anything to? We can do. Yep. So one over here.
Hello, my name is Yelin. I'm a student. I just have a very short question. If we go beyond legislation and technical matters, how can you make people trust civic tech? I think it's a very important point. You talked about, for instance, fintech, and I think it's very interesting because if we look at that, we can see that it's very probably making the financial market efficient, maybe, I don't know. But if we look at the survey, only 8% in France believe in fintech, and whereas 10% believe in horoscope when they're making investments. I mean, it's crazy, you know. And I think there is also the same problem with civic tech, especially in France. In our culture, we don't really believe in algorithm. We don't believe in blockchain. I think it's so. That's my question. How do we make people trust that? Thank you.
And I think we had another one down here.
Hi, I'm Edwin Lau with the OECD. I had a question. How do you make sure that people, when they participate in civic tech, have some skin in the game, you know, so that they're responsibilized by participating? Would you see some basic principles like no anonymity, or making sure that people have some minimum awareness, or that there's some consequences for their actions on civic tech?
Great. Should we address those two first?
Well, let me try a couple of those. So first of all, on that last point, which also came up in some of the questions, in our work, we've tried to break down the democratic process into a whole series of stages, from framing of issues, developing ideas, commenting, through to decision. And whenever you're close to decision, then I think you can't have anonymity in a democracy. You have to be held to account. There has to be secure identity. But at the earlier stages, I think it's probably fine for people to be completely anonymous in their views. But this is one of the crucial design issues for all of these tools. And then on a couple of the other points, I think what we'll learn over the next few years is how these tools work or don't work will vary greatly depending on the kind of issue being dealt with. If you think of all the things a parliament or a government has to deal with, you can think of some of them on two axes, crudely. You know, one is how much specialized expertise do you need to have a meaningful opinion on that topic? And, you know, regulation of fintech, you probably need a fair bit of knowledge of both finance and technology to have a meaningful view. So if you try and pretend that everyone's views are equal, you'll end up with a really stupid decision which won't be trusted and won't be legitimate. So there's a sort of calibration by degrees of expertise, and in practice, most of the current experiments focus on things like investments in public spaces or issues where the public are actually pretty expert. And then the other axis, think about how much morality is involved in issues. If they're ones which sort of bring to the fore deeply clashing moral principles, the more you amplify them in a digital space, the more you may actually polarize opinion rather than helping people come to a decision. And again, if they're misused on the wrong kind of topics, they'll probably lead people not to trust the tools themselves. So their ideal space is on issues which are not too dependent on highly specialized expertise, not too highly charged in terms of conflicting values. Luckily, that's still quite a lot of what governments and parliaments do.
Well, I completely agree, and I would say that I think the question is not open democracy. Now we talk about basically direct democracy, which I don't believe in. I believe that we have to have representative democracy because some people do not have the time to learn on what they're voting for if it's too specific. This means you can get crazy results, and I very well mentioned they can judge by their horoscope what they will vote, if they will vote, on what they will vote, or where they will invest. So we cannot do that, and that's why We have to improve democracy. That's why dialogue is important. You produce politics by discussing, and you can improve the way you have democracy. But I don't believe in direct democracy because of the reasons that you mentioned. You can have terrible consequences if you don't have every point of view needed to make this decision, and if you don't have the responsibility to understand that there are consequences that you might not even imagine if you make a decision. So I would say first we have to educate people to be more responsible in any kind of decision, and then we have to slowly try to get advice through voting in simple matters. So slowly then you can improve and they can understand how this online voting can affect their lives. Because we talk about a digital world where you have no borders, you have different mentalities, different beliefs, different religions, different political systems, and online you cannot have that. Sometimes you have a platform where everybody can engage with everybody, and you have to have minimum rules there. You have to protect some decisions, some communities. You have to be able to teach citizens how to connect with each other. There are many problems. I don't want to be, just to mention the negative side. I want to see the potential there, because I think globalization and the way it happened so fast, we didn't prepare citizens enough, and not even politicians, scared people, and now they're turning into more protective policies and attitudes. So I would say through this civic technology, we can have a more decentralized democracy, not just a central authority that can make mistakes, of course, and then change your life forever, but more decentralized, digital, more democratic, more distributed, I would say. But still you have to be careful, because this could go the wrong way. Any tool can be used for good or for bad. I do believe that blockchain gives you the safety of your data. So it's a new technology that your history cannot be deleted, cannot be altered. And as more users, because you asked if more users use something, if that could benefit us. I think so, because if you have a bigger sample, then it's less difficult to, it's more difficult to make the wrong decision. So I think we should get more people use these technologies first, learn how to use it, and then implement it. Because I don't know, the sample that you had on the fintech decision, 8% of whom? Of everybody? Or of those that know what fintech is? Because not a lot of people know. So it depends. So you have to be able to educate before you ask for something, to have an opinion. And you can decide something like against fintech, and you think it's okay because, no, I don't want my data from the banks to be out there. But at the same time, maybe your cousin, you said the cousin, maybe the cousin cannot get financing for his SME from the bank, and then you destroy his business, and you don't know that this would be an implication, a consequence. So I think we have time to go there, but there is potential, because you can have transactions without intermediaries, so less cost. You can have a more transparent way of choosing, more options. Through digital voting and online voting, you can have more options. I think referendums are completely dividing citizens. If you have more options, if you explain why you voted no, this could improve our democracy. But it's different to make a decisive vote, and it's different to give an advice to politicians or a strong message. So I think it can improve a lot our lives if it's done the proper way.
I totally agree on the last point of, if we make more referendums, we have to build them differently. And if you're asking, do we want peace in Colombia, you can just put that question and say yes or no, and you have like 50 different treaties inside one. And we actually did a small experiment with Democracy Earth in Colombia. They decided not to open the voting booth for the diaspora. The Colombians that live outside of Colombia, it's like 9 million people, I think. And we had this software for liquid democracy, so we wanted to test it, and we collaborated with NGOs from Colombia and representing the diaspora. And we did a digital referendum for the Colombians who couldn't vote on the issue. And those very people left Colombia maybe because of the civil war. So we made this digital referendum for the Colombian diaspora, and we built the referendum slightly differently. We say, okay, so inside these questions, there's like 5 or 6 questions. And so we put the question, and the results were really interesting. On 5 of the biggest measures of the treaty, everybody agreed. They are like 75, 80% agree on the treaty, and there was one who was the complete opposite. 80% were against, and so we had this data saying, okay, 80% of the people are against FARC participating in the political process of Colombia, having a party, having political financing, and we had this data saying, okay, people agree about on everything, but just that, and we have a no on a very important referendum, just because we need to rethink how we do referendum and break down questions, and of course offer those kind of new ways of participating, but who are more intelligent and more flexible, because maybe we can rely on digital technology.
If I may add here something, just a point, because of my experience, we completely failed to our referendum in Greece. I don't know if you remember the case, but like 2 years ago, we had a referendum. So what you're saying is basically be careful what the question is, because if you phrase the question in the wrong way, you might get a result that you don't want. So the question in Greece was, do you like the austerity measures? No. So
The government ignored the result.
yeah, but why? Because they, but listen to what happened. And this is a very interesting case. It's a case study, I think, for the future scientists to understand the mentality of citizens or Greeks, I don't know. So there was 40% that voted yes. Really? Who likes austerity measures? So what happened is that the government said, okay, so I won because I wanted a no to make a strong point and negotiate a better deal. They got a worse deal. More austerity, more taxation. It killed the economy, basically. We had capital controls, and this means our banks suffocated. It costed almost 20 billion, just this fantastic decision. But nobody informed citizens that if you vote no, it means no, but it means you can get a worse deal than that. So are you ready to accept that? I'm not certain that would win the referendum. So the way you phrase the question is extremely important. The governments can manipulate citizens to vote for something. Everybody wants world peace. You can get an easy yes there, but you don't want austerity. No, you don't. But so you have to explain what happens if you vote and what exactly are you voting for. Because some people in Greece, they don't even know what they voted for. They think they voted against the old system, against the establishment, against the politicians that failed. Yes, I wanted to vote no, but I know that this is not the case, because nobody would come and give you the money for your no. So now we're paying for this mistake. That's why I'm against referendums, basically. I think they divide citizens. It's very dangerous. It's not all the governments, that are governments that would benefit citizens. We have bad governments. They make mistakes. So I agree that it's a great tool to improve democracy, but we cannot go there without slow and step-by-step, without a process that would mature the society and the citizens and, of course, the technology that's being used.
Yes, I think me and Jeff, as British residents, can attest to the issues around referendums and the deals that follow or don't. Very quick question, one more.
Eva, I think you gave some very important information, and that is about an electronic identity for all citizens or residents, and in what area would that be, the EU what would be the purpose, basic purpose of having everybody having an electronic identity or document?
Well, we're trying to have a union. It's different than US. So in US, you have the same language, the same legal system, the same taxation system mostly, with exceptions. So in Europe, you don't have that, but you have freedom of movement. So you can go to another country and work. You can work in Paris, but you can go for a weekend back in Brussels, and you can have your house somewhere else, but work somewhere else. So you can rent, you can stay with someone and not actually have an account on your name. So if you want a banking account, or if you want to be able to make a transaction or use your credit card, it's not very easy. And if you're in capital controls from Greece and you want to make an online payment, it's close to impossible to use it. So this idea would make it possible to be more, so they say mobile, so you can take your data with you. You could have your health data in another country. If something happens, you don't have to translate them. It's there. You can have your identification, your credit cards. You can have, you can pay for something without having to prove that you live in the same city. You can have a pension, your insurance. You can have it in your country, but you can work in another country, you're able to get it there. You can prove who you are. If somebody, my ID is in Greek, nobody understands it, it's an EID, so it can go through the security systems more easily, and depends on the way we built it, the platform that it's on. It can make it, of course, super safe. It cannot be stolen. It can be connected with your fingerprints and your tax number, your insurance number. So everything will be more easy to help you move away from your country, go back, or do transactions, have your data secured, and maybe even on your phone. Yes, I think it's a big improvement.
Thank you. Okay, we've probably got a minute or two left, so maybe 20 seconds, each of our panelists, if you've got any closing thoughts. Brevity is our friend here.
Well, I think a key...
Speaking of the elections, I think.
I won't think about that. Democracy is not something which you can deduce from a few abstract principles. In reality, it's a mix of things about your culture, your civil society, your media, your parties, your parliaments, and how they interact. And in the same way, I think the new forms of democracy need to evolve through experiment and trial and error, and they will all be sort of mongrel, in a sense, hybrids of different elements, rather than pure sort of push-button online democracy or sort of pure old-style representative democracy. I don't know where we'll end up, but I think this is an absolutely extraordinary decade we have ahead of us, partly because of public distrust in the old forms, where I hope we will accelerate experiment in the new forms so that in 10 or 20 years it will be obvious that the kind of civic tech models are just the way you should do things.
Thank you. Ava, you've got 20 seconds.
Okay, I will close with an example. We voted 2 months ago for the agreement with Canada, the trade agreement of EU. It's called CETA. When I voted for that, I had a huge reaction from Greece because they thought that we would destroy the production of feta. It was like the Greek cheese. And why? Because they didn't have all the information. Nobody read the agreement. But I had to make a choice, and I voted because this would remove the VAT, this would make it easier to export, and this would make everybody that produced this product in Canada should actually say that it's not Greek, it's made here. So it was a huge improvement. It was not perfect. So they were against me because it was not perfect, but it was an improvement. So you have to make decisions. It has consequences, and that's why I think the potential, it's huge. I can communicate what I did. I can explain it online. I can go viral and reply to everybody. But the potential is there unless we are also responsible to understand that there is potential and we make the best use out of it. Because even a knife can be used for a good and bad. The same with technology, the same with everything. We have to be able to use it in the best possible way to improve our lives, citizens' life, and take under consideration their needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Virgil?
Well, I agree by all means. Democracy is and will always be a work in progress. I hope we'll never stop. If we stop, it's probably a bad sign. And I think it's very exciting, actually. We've been saying a lot blockchain event. I think we weren't allowed to enter much into the details. But with this new technology, actually, it's getting exciting. People to work on exciting stuff that are actually about the infrastructure of internet, which has gone from a very utopist, decentralized idea and generated lots of enthusiasm. It has gone back to lots of centralism. Yeah. You get the idea. And now with these technologies, we have like lots of new people working on a decentralized internet that could be incorruptible, that could be hosted on, I don't know, on everybody's computer, on everybody's phone, where you can't be evil, and it's definitely, this technology is definitely the good juridical layer to build on top better incorruptible transparent systems, and it's been a huge problem in civic tech, because we do great applications, but if you look at the facts, at the technical infrastructure, they are hosted on a server, and the system administrator can basically do what he wants. One can put it on, put it off, change the data record, and the person, the system administrator, doesn't even want this responsibility. I've known people who automate thousands and thousands of servers, and yeah, we are like putting this responsibility out there, and it's a problem, and we can't be more opaque and than our old institutions. We have to do better.
Thank you. And thank you all for a really interesting and dynamic discussion. I've had a great time. I hope everyone here has found it useful. If you're interested in hearing more on civic tech, please stop by the Civic Tech Hub, which is at the bottom of the elevators. Jeff will be presenting on how digital democracy can amplify collective intelligence at 3:15. And at 4:15, OECD's Observatory for Public Sector Innovation team will be sharing new work on how governments are innovating for better impact. Coming up, the next two panels, they're actually taking place at, they're not taking place in Amphitheatre 3, sorry. In Amphitheatre 1, It Takes Two to Tango, Trade and Social Protection Policies, and in Amphitheatre 2, Inequality, Digitalization and Competition. So lots and lots of interesting stuff coming up. I'd just like to thank the panelists, and I hope you'll join me in giving them a round of applause.
Well, 1 hour and a half is a lot.